welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, and I'm really excited to be speaking with our guest today. Everything about your book and the description of your book immediately kind of grabs me. I am a sucker for this type of nonfiction, for this type of, it's almost like memoir, but I don't know, it's kind of dissecting something that's also very current. And it makes me think a lot about, uh, something that we were just very briefly talking about parental milestones before I started recording. But as somebody who has my own children who are starting to discover music on their own, it makes me think about how I discovered music, and which is why I think this is a very timely book. But before we continue, will you please do us the honor of introducing yourself and telling us about this book?
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. My name is Rollie Pemberton. I also make music as Cadence Weapon, and I am the author of Ways of Listening. Yeah, is that good?
It's perfect. And the thing about ways of listening, it's ways of listening is the main the title of the book, but then it's, finding meaning for, music in the digital world. And again, it really makes me think, because even the way that I consume and discover new music now is extremely different than I did when I was an adolescent. Like when you're very, very young, or at least for me, I was in the back of my parents' car. So I was listening to a lot of like CBS
Mhm.
FM. There was the doo-wop shop, like all of these things. I knew all about the Beatles and the Beach Boys. And then obviously you get older and your tastes, like it's almost like you collect everything. Like you're walking along a beach and you're collecting your music taste like seashells. And I worked at Borders Books and Music, which again was another way of finding new music. And I just feel like it's just changed so much these days. And you, as a musician, to write this book at this time, could you tell us a little bit about what was your nexus moment? Like, what was the moment where you're just like, this is what I have to write right now?
Yeah, so my first book was just a straight memoir about my music career. And in writing that, the stuff that people resonated with the most were the parts where I was just doing straight music journalism, and where I'm doing the history of hip hop, the history of grime music in the UK, the history of trap music. And that response made me think, it'd be nice to have a more definitive, just pure music journalism book. But this specific topic, the way it kind of came together for me is I just started thinking as an artist how much I've had to navigate the algorithms and navigate streaming apps, to get people to hear my music today versus when I first came into the scene in the early 2000s, when it was just really direct. You make music, you do traditional press, and people will hear your music. Even the early social media, it was much easier, like MySpace or something. People would just click on your thing, and you could go viral, and there was no
Most people,
buffer.
yeah, most people do forget that MySpace really, like, that's what it was sort of built as originally, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a big part of MySpace. It was just, a place for artists to share their music, and there was no payment model. There was no idea, oh, pay if you buy ads, more people will see it or whatever. But yeah, I wrote this book for the younger generations, people who maybe see music as just a backdrop for content creation, on TikTok, or just see it as something that's disposable, because I think that's what Spotify and TikTok have actually caused. They've caused music to be devalued in a lot of ways.
So, what are some of like the things that you aimed to tackle when you were writing this? And did anything kind of go in a different direction with each part?
Yeah, so the way I wanted to approach this book, I wanted to have a kind of a tutorial aspect to it, which is really heavily in the first essay, I would say, where I teach people how to find music without using the algorithm and just kind of reconfigure the way you listen and the way you engage with music in the outside world. So I knew I wanted to have that part of it. I wanted to do some case studies of contemporary artists that I think are navigating the music world well in different ways. Like I have one that's primarily focused on Charlie XCX for the art of the album rollout. And similarly, I have the Drake and Kendrick Lamar battle, just as an example of how the internet has revolutionized hip hop battles and has changed hip hop. So I wanted to have those, and then in between, there were just certain themes that I knew that I was going to have to touch on. Like it's interesting when I first, wrote the outline for the book, I wasn't really planning to have an AI chapter at the time of planning the book, but then it just became inevitable that I needed to speak on it, and I was able to approach it from a few different directions and really get, I think, a pretty at the time that I wrote it, a pretty complete assessment of my issues with AI as an artist and as a consumer. So that it became just branching out into those different topics, but they all have a similar theme, which is how musicians are navigating technology and the changes in technology in music today.
Would you say that, I mean, I know you mentioned a few people, but would you say that it's easier as somebody who's kind of been in it for a while versus somebody who is sort of integrated into that already? I mean, I personally, like for me, I don't understand how, the how it all works. I do know that, when I'm listening to something and it's something I listen to, it'll push certain things that are similar to that.
Mhm.
Which could be great, but then at the same time, a lot of times, like when I'm discovering something new, it's either somebody drops a lyric on like social media or just in these really obscure ways that lead me to being like, oh, this is really cool. And it's not offered to me. It wouldn't have
Mhm.
been offered to me if not for that way. Uh,
Mhm.
so that to me is very interesting. What are your thoughts about that as a whole?
Yeah, see, I think that's really the fatal flaw of algorithmic recommendations is they only recommend things based on what you've listened to before. They can only draw from the past, which is also similar to AI that is derivative and is only based on existing intellectual property, right? So um, I find I avoid the algorithmic recommendations. I don't use Spotify anymore, and Apple Music, I like they're not as pushy about it. You can totally direct your listening in a way that you can't at all on Spotify. Um, I do think the whole idea of the algorithmic recommendation is it is unlike how we actually engage with music in a day-to-day experience. Okay, so yeah, I'll find out about a song reading the comments on TikTok about a Fetty Wap video that I saw, and then they're like, "Oh, this reminds me of this other song," and I'll go and listen to that song. And then I'll be like, "Oh, this is amazing. Who's this artist?" And that's a way that I'll find about an artist. And I'll just kind of go on my own journey and go down the rabbit hole that way. The other thing about the algorithm is it can't predict that I would be a Lana Del Rey fan. based on the profile of other things that I listen to. The way we listen as individuals, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it isn't linear. Sometimes it isn't obvious. There's some songs that are my all-time favorite songs, and maybe I don't listen to them all the time, but I love them more than maybe something that I listen to every day. So, like I love Van Dyke Parks. I like these kind of things that the algorithm just would not be able to even match me with or match similar artists to, you know?
I do. And just kind of going back, you mentioned videos. That's not like that doesn't seem to exist the way that it used to either. I mean, a lot of the music that I discovered on my own when I was younger I had insomnia and I put on VH1 or MTV, and something out of the blue, like that they wouldn't play during their normal hours, would come on, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And another thing that, like, I lament this every day is the loss of things like the mixtape or
Mm.
just the mix in general, because that was another way. I feel like this is kind of like going back to, like, hey, remember the olden days, but really it did revolutionize the way that I started listening to my own music. And that's not to say that my parents' music was not good. It is, and it's the building blocks of a lot of things that I did enjoy. But then there were outliers. There were things that were different, and there were things that I would have never found out about if a friend didn't put it randomly on a mixtape in between a bunch of things that they knew I'd like. And then they're just like,
Hmm.
this isn't, you were talking about things staying on theme with the algorithm. It's like, well, this isn't really on theme, but it kind of is. And that was so special. That was really a connection, not just to the music, but also to the person, and just as a whole, it just sort of like opened up the culture of how we found things,
Mm.
trading music in that way.
No, I still remember the first burnt CD I ever made, and what was on it. I remember at the time, because I was a teenager, it was a lot of Eminem. I had Stone Temple Pilots, Big Bang Baby. I had do you remember the Jerky Boys? I had a bunch of skits from
Yes.
Jerky Boys, like comedies. Get like this stuff is
Yes.
it's been lost to time. Like it's not like something that anyone brings up today.
That was good though for, like, if you're going to do like a bumper between certain things, like like a
Mm.
transition. But again, like, this is what I'm talking about. It really was an experience making making these things for your friends. It was a labor of love and a way to introduce them to new music and tell them about yourself. And then if you put these little skits in between, it gave some personality to it.
Hmm. No, it's a total art form, and I just remember how long I would craft a mix, especially if I was trying to impress a girl or something, and I'm like, this has got to be the greatest collection of music ever made,
It was
you
such,
know?
like, yeah, it was such a good, like, you have your dating profiles these days. It was
Mm.
like a dating profile. It was a friendship profile. It was like, hey,
Hmm.
this is me in music form. And if this doesn't work, I guess it's just, we're just not going to connect. But it is really very different from today.
It's very different from today, even compared to the early online way of trading like mixes, even if it's like digital files, there was still some charm in that. There's still something human that I think we're losing with the way the playlist system of a lot of these apps. Like I remember my one really good friend Rachel, I'll never forget, she put me on to the Cleaners from Venus. She was the first person to introduce me to that band. And it was from a mix that she made me and sent me on like Sin Space or one of those hosting websites. And I still remember that. And all the music she used to give me, and it was so meaningful. It's kind of like the foundation of our friendship. I feel like I've never felt like that about a Spotify playlist that somebody sent me. Like it's missing that human element, and just the way that you listen on Spotify, it is not it's not a good way to have focused listening. It's just you're flitting around constantly, and you can listen too quickly, and you can just rip through things, and you're just like, if you don't like it, next, 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 and it's just too, there's no friction at all. If you had a CD that somebody burnt for you, you're gonna listen to it, you're gonna put it in your car stereo. Like, I have one friend back in Edmonton, my friend Jessica. She still listens to the same CD that's been in her car that I made her for like 15 years. I think it's the kind of thing where she can't even take the CD out. It's stuck in there. And she still listens to that same mix that I made her. I love that.
I think that that's fabulous. And then even like if for those of us who also were on that cusp of cassette and CD, it was even more difficult because you could not only could you not like just skip to the next song, but like if you wanted to fast forward, that
Mm.
was a process, you know, like that was not easy. So really, it was almost like just a meditation on the person who gave it to you, or if you made it for yourself, a meditation on who you were at the time when you made it.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, I recently came across an old hard drive of mine, and I went on there and I found some CDs that I like, all the songs, like the lists of songs, like not even the files. For when I used to DJ with CDs in a pub in the year 2002 or something, right? And just going back and seeing what I was playing, and just thinking about where I was at that point in my life, and just the context around why I would be burning those songs. It was really like a journal entry or something. It was very personal, and it was really a great snapshot of who I was at that time.
So, in terms of your book, what are some of the things that you sort of found, like some of the ways to successfully harness a meaningful relationship with music? I know you'd mentioned Charlie XCX's, you know, just the way the album rollout and just in general, you know, without giving too much away, because clearly people should read the book. But like if you were to kind of cultivate a few highlights or a highlight, what would you say?
Yeah, I think that's a really good example that you pointed out, the Charlie XCX example of her rollout for the album Brat. I feel like she pioneered something there. This idea that to get people to appreciate an album, to attribute value back to an album in our contemporary way of listening, you have to do something in the real world. You know, you have to break beyond the algorithm and do something that is in physical space. And she did that with the Brat wall that was changing in Brooklyn, and everyone was like, what's it gonna say tomorrow? And it just added this level of excitement. And the whole rollout was just unpredictable. You didn't know where she was gonna show up next. Maybe she didn't even know where she was gonna show up yet next. And it was just the chaos that it was just really thrilling to follow. And I think a lot of people have modeled their rollouts after that in the recent past. I'd say the Lily Allen album, her rollout is very post Brat. I would say Lord would be the same. Like, it's very post Brat. And yeah, I've even drawn from that a little bit just with my last album that just came out in April, called Forager. I did this thing where instead of doing album release shows, I decided to do vintage markets in different cities, and that was my way of promoting the album. And people would come, and I would like sell vintage clothes to them, and the album would be playing, and I had like an alternate version of the album that you could only buy at the market. And just kind of world building, because the big theme is about vintage clothing history. And yeah, you just have to reinforce the themes of an album in stuff that you're doing in the real world in a way that wasn't necessary in the past.
I'm glad that you brought up that you had an album because I was actually going to ask you about it. No, that's a really great way of not just rolling out an album or you know, it's just like it's making an experience. Like it really is. And it reminds me again of, you know, being in a place like when I used to work at Borders and they would play the current music that was out, and you would associate that with like finding something that you really enjoyed. Yeah, so I mean that's really brilliant. How have you like how has that really worked for you? Have you really enjoyed it? Did you find any unique challenges?
Yeah, it worked great, actually. I think people have been messaging me and kind of repeating the themes to me. So it's like it's getting through. People are getting it. And it's just it's become maybe one of the best branding exercises I've done as an artist, I think. And I think people just really innately understood it because of all the world building I did around it. So I feel like it went really well. And I think it made me appreciate the album more myself, I think, just by thinking of different creative ways to express it and to express the underlying meaning. It's another art form. That's what I'm trying to really talk about in the book, is that the rollout is just as important as the album now, and it's another art form. And I feel like social media is the same way. It's another art. It's another skill that now we have to bring into our repertoire as artists, that wasn't really there when I first started.
So that said, looking forward, do you think that there will, I mean, there's so much one can say about AI and, like its connection with algorithms and things like that. But in different industries, there does seem to be, I don't want to call it, I don't even know what to call it, a revolt against it, but there really does seem to be um artists of all kinds who are breaking the mold and showing that there is desire for this real thing and something that is really human curated and human created. Do you see this being like a really long, enduring, exhausting fight for us to kind of continue to find meaning in music and art in general with everything that's sort of being pushed? I mean, I really feel like there's so much like, well, it's inevitable. We might as well embrace it. But then you see people really pushing back against it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I always bristle at this idea that these things are inevitable because I've seen things be pushed back and just not happen. Or I've just seen so many technologies and so many things that everyone was saying, "Oh, this is going to be how we do things going forward," that just stopped existing in the next year. Like these platforms are not stable. Like Spotify, they could shut down next year. They could meet some kind of regulatory challenge and they could be gone tomorrow, like next year, right? So, I've seen so many empires climb to the top and fall. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if no one is talking about AI in a year or two, as that's possible to me.
It would, I mean, again, it would certainly be great from different aspects. Again, not to say there are functions for it, but what it's being pushed as is not really, is trying to replace this real human aspect of
Hmm.
experiencing music, experiencing art, experiencing things in general, and creation. And again, like as the parent of 11-year-olds, I don't know if they're just like rehashing memes that they hear, but they're really not into it. Like they see something that's
Hmm.
AI or they hear and they're just like, ugh, you
It's
know.
lame.
Yeah,
It's like not cool.
it's got no
It doesn't
soul.
have
It's
it doesn't have a
got
vibe,
no
I mean,
depth.
no,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I think just the way that they tried to bring in AI in North America in the Western world, they really failed with how they branded it. They made it so it's like, okay, we're gonna actually just replace all your jobs and take your jobs, and also all your leisure time. We're gonna replace that too. So you can't even make your own music. The machine's gonna make it for you. Whereas, from what I understand in China, though their approach to AI was like, here's all this stuff to help you. and here are all these things you can use to help you do things. And it's
Sure.
not about replacing you. It's about like you can integrate this into your life or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that makes sense. But yeah, it really is very interesting, and I have been enjoying the pushback, especially when you see these graduation speeches where
Oh yeah.
somebody's like, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah.
and AI is the new industrial revolution, and everybody's like, no.
What do you like, what are these people thinking? You are going in front of a bunch of people. This might be the last generation of people that were able to get through university unadulterated without heavily engaging in AI. And these people are about to go into the workforce that is already depleted and more challenging than ever because of this particular technology, right? It just goes to show that there is a bit of a blind spot by a lot of the corporations and the people who stand to benefit financially the most from AI, when it comes to the public's acceptance of the technology. I find it is remarkably unpopular technological advancement that is only receiving so much uptake because it's being snuck into things and hidden. And whereas the kind of thing where you go on your phone and you like brush your thumb on it by accident, and it's like that you turn on the AI. I'm like, yeah, that's the only way they can get people to use it is by accident. That doesn't, to me, sound like this really persuasive, exciting, world-changing technology. If it were that way, I would be right on it. I'd be like, wow, I'm so excited and I feel so good about this. Why is it that you have to trick us into using it if it's so great?
And I really think the people, like people, they know, it's not like people don't realize it. Even, like kids realize it, people realize it, immediately, and it's frustrating. But it really is great, to talk to you, and that you're writing about it and people are talking about this, and just about how to experience art and music. And like I said, when I first started chatting with you, this was one of those books that came across my screen. And I was like, that sounds extremely interesting. That's definitely something that I think a lot of people are thinking about, and I'd love to talk to you about. So thank you
Mhm.
so much for joining us.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me.
So, once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My guest was.
Rollie Pemberton.
Check out ways of listening, and I don't know, make like a physical mix for
Yeah.
somebody.
hmm Make
Like,
a
yeah.
mix for someone in your life today, and
Yeah.
just be more intentional in how you listen to music today.
And how you share it, for sure. Thank you
Hmm.
so much, Rolly. We are
Yeah,
going
thank
to
you.
close. You're well. We're going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.